Welcome to Upfront. I'm Ruth Snyder. We are coming to you live on tape from the Shaw Spotlight Studio on Rob Ron Road in Campbell River. Our very special guest today is Dr. Diane Naugler, who is the Executive Director of Community Engagement for North Island College. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
On this rainy, blustery day.
Yes.
So before we dig into all of the things at North Island College and the foundation, I would like to start way back at the beginning, your beginning. So where was it that you were born and raised?
Well, I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm a maritimer. I lived in 6 different communities in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick before making my way further across Canada.
Now, did you stop anywhere in the middle, or was it literally a coast-to-coast hop?
Well, initially it was a coast-to-coast hop. I actually dropped out of university in my 3rd year, much to the grave dismay of my parents. It was quite a lot of angst and drama, and I moved to Vancouver. I lived in Vancouver for a year. I had a number of frontline jobs, culminating in a position with the mail order department with Mountain Equipment Co-op. But I realized I probably should go back and suck it up and finish that degree. So I did. I went back to New Brunswick with the plan, always, that I was coming back to Vancouver after the 8 months of finishing my schooling, and I did that. And then I lived in Vancouver for another 4 years, making my way into management with Mountain Equipment Co-op at the time. And then looking at the whole thing again and saying, I'm not sure if I'm ready for a business degree and a career in retail. I think I want to go back to school. And so I moved to Montreal, did some upgrading because my transcript was a little spotty, as they say. Yeah. And then I applied to graduate school at York University in Toronto, and did my graduate work there, and moved next to Alberta because the University of Alberta was hiring faculty, and I taught there for a few years. I can keep going. Okay,
now let's just back up for a few minutes. So you were raised in the Maritimes. Did you do all of your grade schooling and high school in the Maritimes?
2 elementary schools, 2 junior highs, 2 high schools, all in the Maritimes. Okay.
Is there a particular teacher that stands out in those years that had either a really positive impact on you or a really negative impact on you?
Well, I think I from my earliest time in school, I loved school. I'm a December baby, and in Nova Scotia, I can remember the childhood pain of not being too young for the cutoff date, which was like October 31st or something. So when I was 5, I couldn't start school with the other 5-year-olds. I was just born a little too late. Turns out that is a huge advantage over time. My family didn't know that at the time, but being a little more developmentally advanced when I went to school with the other new 5-year-olds, and I was nearly 6, really helped. I was reading before I went to school. So my first teacher asked me to help the others learn to read.
Oh, interesting.
And so I think I had a really early exposure to what it meant to help somebody learn something. And by the time I was in grade 12, in my English class, I can remember Mrs. Harvey during the time when you were applying for college and university, put up on the blackboard at the time, percentage of this class who will graduate from high school, 100%. Percentage of this class who will get some college or university. And it was, something like 85%. It was pretty high. But then it decreased as it was get that bachelor degree, get a graduate degree, down to who will get a PhD.
Right.
And I guess I'm a little type A.
A little.
So it was always in my head that it was within my capacity to follow my passions, my curiosities forward as far as they would take me. And, I think that stayed with me when I was bouncing around in my early career years. In the back of my mind, it was like, you could teach, you could learn, you could have a graduate designation,
Right.
and so probably Mrs. Harvey.
Okay. What a lovely story. Now, where did you do, like right out of high school, what was next for you? Did you go to school?
Yeah, I went to university, Mount Allison University in Sackville, New Brunswick. Sackville's a town of 5,000
Yeah.
with a university population at the time of 1,800.
Wow.
And it is a really wonderful, wonderful learning environment, primarily academic focused. And, but, you know, I would say one of the things that environment gave me a passion for was diversity and inclusion, because as a young kid in New Brunswick in the 1980s who was discovering that their sexuality wasn't mainstream and
Right.
whose personal style and gender performance didn't really align with the norms of the time, it wasn't necessarily the easiest environment for me to succeed in. And so it's become a bit of an abiding passion with me. I'm so pleased to see where we've come as a society in the last 30 years in particular,
Right.
around making room for everyone. Everyone who's qualified should have the opportunity. Everyone who's curious should have the opportunity to get qualified and
Right.
and build a life that is deeply meaningful to them and hopefully impactful to their community, regardless of their race or their orientation or their age.
Now, what was your first exposure to beyond maritime?
Vancouver. I was an undergrad, well, you know, television. I did learn as a kid from the Maritimes that important things happened in cities, big cities.
Okay.
You know, the news is very urban focused.
I'd never thought of it that way.
And so when I got a
right.
chance to go to a conference in Vancouver in February, I jumped at it. I was 20, and I was sitting on the tarmac in the Moncton airport in February, and the plane was being de-iced the wings for the third time to help us take off in a blizzard. And it was a red-eye flight, and so when I arrived in Vancouver, and I came out of the airport, and there was a conference goer who was picking me up from BC, and then we were headed to Tsawwassen, to the ferry, because the conference was in Malaspina. I can still remember coming down Granville Street, you know, with those hedges that are like labyrinths, medieval labyrinths, and they just go up and up, and this is like holly, and I'm used to holly being sprigs of holly that are imported during Yuletide season, and these hedges are 40, 50 feet high, and there's a gentle mist in the air, and I have to first take off overcoat, and then second overcoat, and then scarves, and then I'm like, I don't have the clothes for this climate. And I thought, this is for me. This is for me. And I didn't stay in school much longer than that. I dropped out at the end of that year, and I moved to Vancouver, and you know, took a number of jobs and just explored the city, explored cultures and foods and experiences that I didn't even know existed. So Vancouver was my formative years, really.
Okay. How long were you in Vancouver?
I bounced back to New Brunswick to finish my degree, but then I came back to Vancouver for another 4 years and worked with Mountain Equipment Co-op in their mail order department. Back in the days where people sent in hard copies and checks. And ticked off little things. And we were just getting into computers when I left Mountain Equipment Co-op to go back to school.
All right. Now, where you went back to New Brunswick to finish your first degree?
My first degree, yeah.
Okay. And that was a straight BA or?
Yeah, it was a Bachelor of Arts in English.
Okay.
And ironically enough, when I started at the college, it was to be dean of a number of programs, including the School of Business. And I remember that interview very clearly where I said, well, I don't know a whole lot about business, but I do understand teaching and learning and curriculum design, and I hope that I can be helpful with that. And then over the 5 years that I was Dean of Business and Fine Arts and Tourism and Office Administration, I learned a lot about all those areas, and you know, and how important those programs are to the economy of the North Island.
Very much so. Now, when you finished your bachelor's, where did you hop to next?
Well, I hopped into the workforce.
Okay.
But when I was ready to go back to school, I went to Concordia University in Montreal
Okay.
for some upgrading, just to, get myself, challenge myself. I can remember being so nervous for my first midterm test when I went back to school after what felt like all those years. And they had to pry the test out of my hand at the end of, when you finish a test and they're like, everyone put their pens down, the test is over, and I'm like, well, just let me get more out. And I didn't want to give the test up. And then I went home to my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, I think I bombed that test. I did terrible. And then I got it back a week later, and I got a 97. And after class, the professor said, we used your answers for the teaching assistant to grade all the other papers.
Wow.
And I was like, that.
Was that a watershed moment for you?
Well, it was, you didn't make a bad choice. I had no safety net. I left a good job with a good career path.
Yeah.
People in the industry said, are you crazy to go back to school? But I knew I had to follow a passion. I think I've learned over the years more about the importance of meaningful work, and I was ready to teach. I just didn't have the credential to do it. And so I had to go back and do that.
Okay. So that was a master's that you did there?
It was upgrading, and then I did a master's at York University and a PhD at York University in Toronto.
And what was the focus of the
Well, the
master's?
focus was gender studies. Honestly, I did my graduate work on the way medicine and expectations of femininity collide in the delivery of healthcare,
Right.
Particularly focusing on breast surgery. So I had to tell the IT department at York when I was doing my research, I had to send a little note to say, I'm about to do an internet search on breasts. All kinds of things are going to come up. I'm not using the server for pornography purposes. I'm doing actual research. And then I was looking for surgical experiences around breasts. But I did have to send a warning to the IT department. Hey, I'm using this for education purposes. So anyway.
That's awesome.
So I'm a bit of a, I think that the interesting thing about all that is it's the adjacent learning.
Right.
It's the conferences, it's the student government, it's all the things that are beside the core of your learning. When you get into a field of management, I think that's where the real skill set comes from.
Right.
It's not so much about the topic of the credential, it's more about the process and the relationships and what you can, transport into all these different kind of organizational communities.
Very much so. Now, over your lifetime, you were mentioning, even before we started, that the job you're in now is your 38th job. So we're not going to go through all 38. So let's just start with how you ended up at North Island College and when that was.
About a little over 6 years ago.
Okay.
My partner is from Port Alberni. Kate was born and raised in Port Alberni, and we met many years ago at York University. The kid from New Brunswick and the kid from Port Alberni met in Toronto.
Okay.
And we were great friends in university, and then eventually a couple. And when we were deciding what coast will we settle on, I was teaching at Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, and I was on a short-term contract. And Kate was working for the public service in BC on a long-term. And so she said, honestly, it doesn't make sense for me to come to you. You've got to come to me. And I had all these positive associations with BC, and I wasn't very hard to convince. And so I got a position at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Surrey, a multi-campus institution in the Lower Mainland.
Yeah.
And I was teaching sociology, and then I moved into academic administration.
Okay.
And then I felt like I might be ready to be dean, and the North Island College opportunity came up, and we felt so strongly about Vancouver Island. I mean, we had been coming to the island regularly over the past decade,
Right.
and always sort of thought this Comox or Campbell River, these communities, they might be places we could live, and I'm happy to say I think it's worked out well.
Wonderful. Well, I know it's worked out well for the college because you've been one of the great advocates for what the college brings to the table for all ages. So let's start with an overview of your new role at the college. So you started as dean, but now you're in a new position that has a very wide reach. So
yeah, well, I think of it. Community engagement as sort of a 360-degree kind of interface between the college and the communities we serve. So everything from recruitment to marketing and promotion, which is part of recruitment.
Yep.
I don't have anything to do with applications and registrations. We have a registrar office for that. We have program leads for the educational experience. But in marketing, we're telling people about that experience all the time.
Of course.
And then we are supporting that experience through the North Island College Foundation and the scholarship and bursary program that we'll talk about in a little bit. And so recruitment and marketing and promotion and the foundation are in my portfolio, as well as public affairs and advocacy. So we're building an advocacy strategy that puts community engagement first.
Right.
And at the forefront of how the college represents itself. Okay. That's something that Dr. Lisa Domey, our president, has made a real keystone of her presidency and our current strategic plan. And so I'm really excited to be a part of that because my portfolio is always a thing in progress. So we're hoping that by the time in 2026 that the college hits its 50th anniversary, we'll have developed an alumni relations function and completed the 360 degrees of community engagement. Okay. So it's a really exciting portfolio with a lot of talented people doing a lot of outreach at every aspect of those departments.
What would you say is your, if you had to name one, what is the favorite aspect of the job?
Oh, see, you're going to get me in trouble with my staff, right? I mean,
it'd
be very, okay, I'll pick two. I guess one of the things that I'm tasked with is refreshing the college's brand.
Okay.
And I would have to say I was a bit of a brand skeptic in my teaching years. I think I had, like many people, all the sort of flat and false associations with branding that are out there.
Yeah.
But brand is the lifeblood of any organization, especially a business organization. But, you know, I could make the argument that brand's the lifeblood of family, and that would be a whole other conversation.
Yes.
So rebuilding the college's brand, consulting with our partners in community and our potential partners in community, with our students, our alumni, our staff.
Right.
That's really, really exciting work for me.
Okay.
And I'm very, very excited to see where we will get to with that project. We're on track. You might have noticed that some of the imagery that we've been using has really stepped up and become quite colorful and current and inspiring. Yeah. And I think our brand is very authentic to the college. It's about support. It's about care. It's about meeting learners and communities where they are with what they need, and being responsive and approachable. And we're going to try and capture that as we refresh this brand. And I'd say it's hard for me not to pick that work. That's really wonderful work. But it's also hard for me not to pick the North Island College Foundation, because it is my most direct work with our students, in that we are supporting individual students, one student at a time,
Right.
through awards that are anything from $250, which is close to half of what a course costs to take,
Yep.
all the way up to close to $5,000, which gets into maybe that's almost a year's worth of study.
Right.
So that's pretty exciting work, and I know
Okay.
that our little team in the foundation just loves award season. You know, it sounds like the Oscars, but it's a little different when we are reaching out to students and saying, hey,
Right.
we have money for you. We're here to help. We've got your back.
Okay, so I don't want to run out of time before we hit on a couple of main points. So you talked about meeting, the college has this unique ability to meet learners where they're at. And so in a recent document, well, not document, but a recent booklet that NIC has printed, one of the images in there is a bus. And on that bus, it gives a number to and the age groups of who you're actually serving right now in meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, we're responsible for meeting the post-secondary education needs and the employment needs of such a interesting and diverse region. So we're 80,000 square kilometers. We're the North Island,
That's
up from
enormous.
Nanaimo,
Yep.
right, to the Central Coast.
Yep.
And some of those communities are only reachable by float plane or by off-road vehicle or boat or a
Right.
couple of those, you know, and they're small. But they're vital. And so one of the things we learned during the pandemic was that as wonderful as face-to-face learning is, to truly serve this diverse region, we need to always have multiple opportunities for learning and career advancement. So we go into communities.
Right.
We seek additional funding beyond what the Ministry of Advanced Education, Skills and Training gives to us every year for the purposes of serving this region. We seek additional funds so we can take the learning to community.
Okay.
We're putting a lot of resources into digital so that somebody who has a family or works shifts can learn in their own time online
Right.
and still advance
Right.
towards their credential and employment goals. So all that is happening. And to
Yeah.
get back to the bus you were talking about, the interesting thing about the 168,000 people who live in that community is if we represented them as 10 people on a bus, only one of those riders is age 0 to 17. Only one of those riders is age 18 to 24.
Wow.
8 of those riders are outside the traditionally thought of
Okay.
audience and learner pool for college or university undergrad education. So really it's the working population of the North Island who needs us the most and who we need to be there for the most.
I think that speaks to the overall evolution of our society coming into its own state of learning and understanding that learning is a lifelong skill and that you can evolve. You just like in the 1970s, early 1970s, you got into a job, you stayed in it for 40 years.
Yeah.
But by the 80s, that no longer existed. So I think it's really, and now we're in a stage where all of these learners are, maybe they started out in the hospitality for 10 years and then they're transitioning into something else. And I think the numbers on the school bus represent that because you've got from 24 to age 65 that represent the largest number of actual learners at North Island College.
Yeah, I was at an artist talk in Courtenay last night.
Okay.
And I met a woman in her 70s who's taking fine art courses.
Wow.
And she had finished a career in the sciences, and she said, you know, I knew in my 20s I wanted to do something with art, but my parents really felt I should do something more practical. This story has been told before. And, you know, had her career, but we were there for her in the community she lived in when she was able to follow her passion.
Right.
And we're there for folks in the communities that they live in when they're ready to make that move from, say, I've been doing reception, But my boss says, I have a talent for numbers. Well, we've got accounting for office administration.
Yeah.
We've got the business certificate. The business certificate and office administration are available fully online. You don't have to leave your job to take that next step in your career.
Right.
And we certainly, and I think you know better than most, small businesses across the North Island are hungry for employees right now. And as we diversify our delivery methods, we're going to be able to be there to help small businesses meet those employment needs.
And you know what? It's not just small business. It's literally every single industry in Canada and across the island is desperate for employees right now. It doesn't matter if it's Western Forest looking for fallers. It doesn't matter if it's the local accounting firm desperate for a bookkeeper. Everybody is looking.
Well, and even North Island College.
Yes, you are.
We're always looking, now more than ever, and we hire our own. I think some of the stories I'm proudest of is when I meet an employee at the college who says, I got my business diploma from NIC, and now I'm working here. And they're proud, and we're proud of them. Yeah. So I think you'll see more of those stories being told. And to get to the point of what stories need to be told, we've given awards to 411 different students through the North Island College Foundation this fall, and we've already given out about $580,000 to those 411 students.
Amazing.
It's wonderful.
So one of the things that is really important for people to understand is that those awards are only possible because the general population who have a few extra bucks actually donate to the foundation to allow for those awards to go forward.
Absolutely. We have a wonderful, wonderful donor community from across the North Island. Individuals, families, legacy awards, estate planning awards, businesses who have that employee who's made that difference through North Island College and want to support more. And awardees themselves. The foundation is coming up on its 30th anniversary, and we're starting to see donors who say, I got a foundation award when I was in school, and I want to give back. And so these are just really wonderful, community-minded folks who understand the role education plays in community success and vitality.
Okay. That is a great way to end this, and because we are out of time. So Dr. Diane Naugler, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing all of this amazing information with us, and for sharing your story and your journey. It's very insightful. And I think what's nice about when people share their journeys is anybody who's watching goes, oh, okay, it's not a straight line. I can zigzag a little bit. I'm going to zig over here right now.
Yeah.
So thank you again for your time and for all the work you're doing at North Island College and with the foundation. And if you are out there and you are thinking about going back to school, you can check out North Island College website. And if you are a possible donor and you would like to contribute to the North Island College Foundation, that website is up on the screen. Give them a call. They would love to talk to you. Thank you so much for watching Up Front, and thank you to our very special guest, Dr. Diane Naugler. I'm Ruth Snyder. Please join us again.